But first to something that really isn't getting the attention it should. The World Health Organisation is expected to finalise a new pandemic treaty, with talks underway until the 10th of May, so Friday next week. The problem is that if ratified, this treaty could see Australia subjected to rules that are dictated not by our own elected officials, but by UN health bureaucrats. Now, having spent 262 days, I remember every one of them, in locked down Melbourne, I know just how bad the draconian COVID rules were here. But trust me when I say that this new pandemic treaty could see even harsher measures ushered in and more of our freedoms denied. Joining me now is someone who shares these concerns, LNP Senator for Queensland, Matt Canavan. Well, Matt, as I say, few people are talking about the scope of this treaty. Help us understand, for my viewers, what this is all about.
Well, what happened here, Peter, is in late 2021, a number of countries recommended that the treaties that do govern public health responses to pandemics be updated and refreshed. In their words at the time, they wanted a legally binding agreement on members to respond to the pandemic. You'll remember in late 2021, we're at the height, really, of the COVID craziness. You were probably still in lockdown. And despite all the public health advice before COVID stating that lockdowns were useless in response to respiratory viruses, that's where we ended up afterwards. And we've never had a good explanation about why the public health advice was junked during this crisis. Now, with this process that's been set in train, we're effectively looking at giving the body that discredited itself perhaps more than any other apart from the Chinese CCP during this crisis, the WHO. We're going to give the WHO more power. The WHO pretty much got everything wrong about the pandemic. They got the lockdowns wrong that I mentioned earlier, but keep in mind they'd also recommended against us closing our international borders. They wanted us to keep taking flights from Wuhan in late January 2020. Fortunately, the Morrison government ignored that advice and closed our borders regardless. But why would we give this discredited body? It's conflicted given how much money it takes from China. Why would we give it more power? That's what's on the cards here. Now, the latest draft that has come out in the last couple of months has been watered down a little bit from the one that came out earlier, so that's a positive step. But this draft would still give the WHO powers to provide advice on these matters. It would still require signatories to impose laws on misinformation in their own countries. And we've seen how damaging that can be in the last couple of weeks. We shouldn't be handing over more of our rights to international bodies. Our rights should be protected by our constitution and our laws, not subcontracted to international bodies, especially as discredited as the WHO is.
I just want to underscore a point you've just made there, Matt, about us junking our own pandemic plan. We had only in Australia updated our pandemic plan in August 2019, and then COVID hits. We throw away the plan. The plan did not recommend lockdowns. You're absolutely right. I researched all of this. I wrote about it in The Australian a couple of weeks ago. We junked our plans and we basically went into panic mode. We threw freedom out the window. We threw billions of dollars at a problem of our own making, and we weren't steady in our response. And the whole reason we had a pandemic plan that went way back to the era of bird flu, and we updated it regularly, was so that in a time of crisis, we'd have cool heads. Now, we don't even know, we haven't had a proper inquiry. We don't even know what we got right and what we got wrong, but we look like we're going to hand over a whole lot of power here to the UN. Now, the critics of people like you and me raising an alarm about this will say, treaties aren't binding in Australia necessarily, but you and I both know our courts take them very seriously, don't they?
Well, they have been used as a sword, if you like, to cut down the rights of state governments, to cut down the rights of local communities in our own country. So what signing a treaty does is activate part of our Australian Constitution, which gives the federal government the power to implement the provisions of a treaty. And so once that's activated, the federal government will be able to have the power, if we ratify this treaty, to, as I say, clamp down on misinformation. And going back to your excellent column you wrote in The Australian a few weeks ago, you made this point about how we junked all the science beforehand and ended up in a position where it wasn't just that we junked that science, we ended up in a position that anybody who sought to defend the credibility of, say, not imposing widespread lockdowns for long periods of time was denigrated a fool and a conspiracy theorist. And there was no debate allowed, if you remembered at the time. That kind of panicked environment is not one we should institutionalise with laws that effectively ban free speech and criticism of bodies like the WHO. I mean, who are they to tell us that they shouldn't be criticised? I mean, the WHO, as late as February 2020, put out a tweet saying that the coronavirus could not be spread from human to human transmission. I mean, there's never been the proper accountability here of what the WHO got wrong, how they got it wrong, nor the accountability of governments, including our own state and federal governments, of what they got wrong. And until we have a proper Royal Commission, we certainly shouldn't be signing up to a treaty like this that would potentially make things a hell of a lot worse if another pandemic came.
And how much they're funded from China and the pharmaceutical companies and all the other stuff. I mean, it's pretty muddy. Matt, we're going to rely on you to keep them honest as this negotiation keeps going and to flag things, because most of the media don't want to know about it. Thank you for your time.